Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
A busy week in Westminster then for the new Brexit secretary, certainly, who was slapped down by the Prime Minister for saying Britain may leave the European Union's single market, and who then helpfully told the Commons that Brexit actually means leaving the European Union. I think we kind of knew that. The new International Trade Secretary called British business fat and lazy. The new Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, has now launched a campaign group calling for a so-called hard Brexit. Theresa May also pledged to shake things up by relaxing the rules on allowing new grammar schools, a big political test with such a slim majority in Parliament, of course. Well, to discuss all that and maybe more, I'm joined by the editor of the Times Red Box, Matt Chorley. Bringing the numbers to the debate is Joe Twyman, the head of political research at the polling company YouGov, and also here is the deputy political editor with The Guardian, Rowena Mason. Very good to see you all. Lots to chew on there. So what's going on here, Rowena, with the Brexit discussions? The three Brexiteers, so-called, saying things that, you know, perhaps the Prime Minister doesn't agree with, or does she? What's she trying to do here?
Well, one of the problems that Theresa May's got with this phrase, Brexit means Brexit, is that that doesn't really mean anything at all, and she's not explaining what she wants, and so it's left this vacuum for other people to fill it. And we've got this very odd situation now, I think, of Boris Johnson, who's the Foreign Secretary and part of Theresa May's own government, being part of a pressure group to pressure the government to do what he wants.
And indeed to pressure himself, given that that's part of his job.
Exactly. So it's a very peculiar setup.
I mean, Matt, what's your... I mean, there are, you know, there's all kinds of theories going on here that perhaps Theresa May wants a bit of this argy-bargy, you know, you broke it, now you've got to fix it kind of thing.
And I think that's probably what people thought when she appointed her government. Remember, it was very quick. She went from thinking she was going to have 2 or 3 months of a Tory leadership campaign to suddenly being in Downing Street. A cabinet was put together very quickly, and there must be part of her that thinks, was this quite the right thing to do, appointing these 3 big beasts to these ever-conflicting roles. And they all like being in the news. That's the problem. So officially, the number 10 line is, we don't speak about Brexit, we don't talk about the process, we just get on and do it. No running commentary, says Theresa May. Whereas Boris, David Davis, Liam Fox, they love running commentary. They thrive on front pages and creating news and saying what they think. And so you've ended up in this bizarre situation where the International Trade Secretary talking about international trade, and number 10 says it's just his personal view, as if these two things are sort of slightly detached.
And a lot of it now pivoting around this issue of access to the single market, and the Prime Minister saying some access to the single market, David Davis saying, well, we'll probably have to leave. Any polling on this, Joe, about what people actually want in terms of the Brexit settlement?
Yeah, absolutely. What we find is around 1 in 5 people, so about 20%, say, actually, we don't want any kind of association with Europe. We want this, if you like, the hardest of hard Brexits, complete removal from any kind of negotiations. And similarly, around 20%, and often it's the same people, want no kind of immigration into the country at all. But then of the remaining 80%, there's a whole lot of indecision about exactly what that means. And so, yes, people don't want to pay any money to the European Union. They don't really want completely unfettered access for migrants to come here. But beyond that, there's a lot of confusion, and there's no one path that you can point to and say, oh yes, that's popular with even a majority of the population, let alone a sizable chunk.
And Rowan, I was talking to Daniel Hannan there, the MEP, who was seen on the hard Brexit side, prominent Leave campaigner, of course, and even he's saying because of the numbers, because of the nature of the vote, we have to think very carefully about taking on board what the 48% of the UK who lost, what they actually want.
Yes, and in the end, it is ultimately going to have to be some kind of compromise with the EU, because on the one side, if you want if you want to shut down immigration completely, we're not going to get a very good deal with the EU in terms of trade. And on the other side, if you stay in the single market and you have a very soft Brexit, you're going to have to accept some kind of free movement. So I think Theresa May is going to want something in the middle. The danger is if Europe plays really hardball in the negotiations, we're not in a very strong position to get what we want.
When do you think she'll go for Article 50? I mean, you had Donald Tusk in London, didn't we, last week, telling her in actual fact, well, you know, some of your debate in the UK on its own is in cloud cuckoo land. This is not the way we're thinking.
Well, quite. And what's interesting about Theresa May's position is that she has gone out of her way to say, I am not being specific about the timetable. She's suggesting it's going to be in next year, but she is leaving the door open for it to be even later than that, if that suits her politically.
And on these trade negotiations, Matt, I mean, I looked up some of the comments that David Davis made to me a few months ago. He was actually very specific. He was talking about September the 9th being the day on which all these trade negotiations take place. And of course, we're told quite explicitly by trade negotiations, by the European Union, well, you can't have any external trade negotiations until you're not a member of the European Union.
So we need to trigger Article 50. That takes 2 years. So we can only start striking trade deals at the end of that 2-year period, assuming that's sort of early 2019. But Liam Fox has to do something. He's got this job of international trade. Just going around insulting business and calling them fat and lazy isn't of its own a full-time job. So he's got to do something. I suspect what we'll see is lots of quite boring press conferences where he goes and meets his international counterparts from Australia and Canada, and they all say, oh yes, we love Britain and we're looking forward to doing a deal as and when the time comes. But you're absolutely right. You've got to prove that Brexit is a success, we have to do these deals to keep the economy doing well post-Brexit. But we can't do anything about that until we know what the deal is. And we haven't even started it yet.
Joe, any sign of Regrexit, if I can say it so called, of the 52-48, any sign of that change?
Not really. The majority of people think that now that we've voted for Brexit, Brexit should mean Brexit, to use the cliche. And there's very little actual demand for a second referendum. Only about a third of people who voted to remain actually want the second referendum. And as you can imagine, the people that want to leave, they don't want to leave. But
do they, I mean, have you looked at, do they actually say, well, when some kind of deal becomes clearer, 2 years hence or whatever, we might want to have a say on that? We might not agree, or we might want it to go further.
Yes, some do, but it's not the prevailing feeling. The difficulty that the government has is that, in terms of public opinion, the public want all the good bits and none of the bad bits.
So do the politicians.
Well, except that, of course, the EU wants to give, if it's to be believed, all of the bad bits and none of the good bits. Where that clashes is going to be very interesting.
Let's move on to domestic matters, purely domestic, grammar schools, and the polling on that again. Is that a popular policy?
Well, grammar schools are, if you like, the most popular, but a majority don't actually support it. Around about 4 out of 10 people think that we should have more grammar schools. Just under a quarter think that we shouldn't have any at all, and then the rest think that the current system should be maintained. But interestingly, 2/3 of people, when you ask them, well, if you had an 11-year-old who could go to a grammar school, would you want that? 2/3 say yes. So I kind of get the sense that if you build it, they will come.
Rowan, have you any idea why she's doing this? Again, given the discussions we've just been having about the scale ahead with the European Union, why would you be talking about this fundamental change to the education system at the same time?
Well, there are quite a few theories floating around. One is that she wants to do something that will then get blocked because it's not in the Conservative manifesto, and that would give her an excuse, perhaps, to go to the electorate for a proper mandate of her own. Another theory is that it's a dead cat in the political phrase.
Just explain, that's the Linton Crosby, isn't it?
It's something that you throw on the table to distract everybody from the really tricky, difficult thing that's going on, which is Brexit. And, she might be saying, look over here, here's, let's have an argument about this thing instead. But actually, possibly the most simple explanation is the best, and that's that she really believes it. She went to a grammar school. She's got a co-chief of staff, Nick Timothy, who fervently believes in grammar schools, and a lot of the Tory party believe in grammar schools. A lot of the activists, a lot of the MPs. Yeah,
well, but some don't. I mean, given the size of a majority, she's going to be able to get this through the House of Commons and, of course, the House of Lords.
It was interesting. I spoke to Nicky Morgan on Friday.
Yeah.
She was absolutely scathing about it, said that in her time as Education Secretary, she never saw any evidence that it worked generally for social mobility. The problem with grammar schools is they're good for the kids who get into them, which is why when you poll and said, would you be pleased if your child got into one, everyone says, yes, of course they would. What, if you polled and said, how would you feel if your child didn't get into the local grammar school, the polling goes the other way. And yeah, like you said, she's got a working majority of sort of 16, 17. trying to get it through the House of Commons is going to be difficult. It's going to. I'm guessing it's going to be almost impossible to get
But
it through the House of Lords.
if she keeps going this way on other policies, I mean, are we getting closer to? I mean, will there be a clamour for a general election saying, hold on, none of this now was in the manifesto?
I don't honestly think there will be one. I think, assuming that we're on the process of Article 50 being triggered in the new year, I can't see how we can be knee-deep in negotiations with Europe about leaving. And then she says, I'm just going off to have a general election. I'll see you in 6 weeks with a much bigger mandate. I can't see how that works.
And what's to be gained? She only gets another year in office as a result anyway.
It might get a big majority, but that's for another time. We're out of time. Thank you all very much indeed. Very good to see you.